Hello and most welcome to 844, and we will today talk about memory and reality. It's a rather difficult subject, but let me lead you carefully into the ideas of memory and reality. I think the old model within neurology was that we perceived reality and we stored it somewhere in a passive process where you took in reality. And in this storage, almost like a computer bank, your past experience that has disappeared or have been something that happened to you, they are in there collected in, well, memory storage, we often say. And when you remember something, you go into the storage, you take up the correct book, you have a look at it, and you see this is the memory of 1982, 1st of July, or something similar. This model is the common sense model of memory, and it is entering, I would say, on all different strands of reality. Doesn't really matter what subject it is. This is more or less the general perception what is memory. And I would say in the bottom here is a problem in the foundation, the pre-conceptual foundation of all this. And it needs to be a pre-conceptual foundation. We cannot found anything on the axioms or the hypotheses themselves. It has to be something before. And this before is it doesn't lend itself to criticism. We cannot say no to it. We cannot say yes to it. It is before yes and no. It is before not. It was already proven by Gödel's theorem that it's a necessity to have something beyond mathematics to have a possibility to have consistent, coherent, and non-contradictory mathematics. That is an absolute predisposition. In the bottom there is a division, and this is this division that plays havoc on the situation. It's the division, for instance, in time, where we say present and past, and we know by experience and how much we went through this is incredibly important division. And it seemed to have its truth in that now and past are their contradictions, and that past is constantly absent, and now, this very moment, is the living now, the only thing that is actual, real. And you see here, to some extent, there are similarities when we talk about reality in here as well, in space. In time, the equivalence of being here is now. Well, how often doesn't one hear You should live in the present. That's the only thing that matters. Everything else is non-existent. I would say this division is pretty well established in Western thinking. And of course, it has its beginning in the polarity of present and past. And one part is the magic trick. I can show you once more. First, you make a division, and that division is not a hypothesis, it's not conceptual, it is not a spoken division. It is pre-language, it's almost pre-thought. It's in the gestalt. After that, we're starting to have a sort of simple concept, and that concept is the idea of prioritization. What has priority? Well, of course, it is the present that has priority. And then we marginalize something. And what do we marginalize? Well, we marginalize the past. And we always go from the prioritized part of the division to the marginalized part. That is the sequence. That is the working order. And now we're building up concept, and they come in pair. And the past is an absolute necessity to build up this twofold division. And this is how we go about making the present more glorious, more shining, better. And the funny thing is, the odd thing is, and here comes the deconstructive move in. From where does this fantastic feeling of presence coming from? Well, it's coming from the marginalization of the absent, of the past. So there is a dependency here. It's a dependency. So you would like to want to be in the now, but it seems the now is completely dependent on the past. And there it begins. There starts a confusion. And once started, once the movement is on, more and more things tend to establish itself. And how does memory come in here? Well, it comes in when the constructions have reached a level when you start thinking of the past as completely gone. And the only thing that remains of the past are the memories. Nothing else. All the rest is gone. And of course you can hear when I say this sounds completely self-evident. Isn't it so? Well, here is the fantastic thing with deconstruction once you can do it yourself. Well, it has several problems to it. Several, I would say. Remember what I said about preconceptual. Anteriori, before. Actually, the marginalization and the prioritization is something we do a posteriori, after the fact. So there is an odd time order already established. And I would say that is the very thing that makes this relation and construction cumbersome, difficult, because it's bound to create clefts between different memory parts, because every memory part seems to be connected to one now. Memory part, one now. It is passing away into the past like a train, derailed maybe, and they should be stored together. That's the whole idea. This is obvious to create problem. All of a sudden we have a library at the size of UB, why not? And you're sitting in room number 7 and the air is gone. And you try to remember. Well, the model in itself, I would say that is the major cause why we do not remember any longer in modern society. It's the construction of memory being far away and absent. If you have your memories absent and far away, how easy would it be to get to them if they're no longer real? And it's this goneness that I'm questioning here, so to speak, in a soft way. The idea of the past being completely gone, and that the now is an orphan, not related to the past. The now is an orphan, and it's constantly reborn every moment. Every moment the now is reborn. Poor orphan. You almost feel tempted to name this poor orphan, give him or her a name. Why not call him Jack? I think that's a fitting name. Jack reminds about jaggedness, and there's this cleft that is in between every moment, and that you yourself enforce at every moment. It's not given by the preconceptual gestalt of the reality. You do it. You are doing the cleavage yourself. And if you are doing it, you can also undo it. You do not necessarily have to do it. But deconstruction has as its innermost aim to show to you that there is an option, and also lay out in the open where is it situated. It's a little bit like taking away some of all the overgrown foliage, rotting leaves, and so forth, and making space enough so you can see it yourself, experience itself. And I would say that is the very start of the change. But it needs to come out in open air. It cannot no longer be hidden away. And if you see it in its totality, you will directly realize that this division makes memory something hard to access, makes it inaccessible. In computer language, that would be, for you, Henrik, and others, would be not having the memory bit memorized. Doesn't have a serial number so you can find it again, or the function to find it doesn't work because the memory is not organized. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that is the very same thing as erasing something in the computer. You don't actually erase things in the computer. What you do is you take away where you can find the memory thing, and thereby the memory is gone. Doesn't occupy any space anymore. It can be overwritten and so forth. But in some ways it's still there. Well, in most ways. And I would say this is what we are doing when we have this system, this idea system that the past is past. It's a zombie variety of the presence in in this orphan called Jack. And for every time we create Jack, which seem to be closely connected with the subject in space in front of objects, we make a little division. And nowadays there is no care for memory training, memory retrieval. It seems unnecessary to train. And part of the reason for that, or I would say the biggest chunk, I would say this is what causes that movement against memory. It's the very fact has something to do with something that is gone. The passive process makes it even more gone. Really makes a feeling that is completely gone. Where it went, that's another question. But I would say this affects even other things, because future, for instance, I won't mention future here, but future is absolutely dependent on that you have some sort of wholeness in the presencing. I call reality presencing here to sort of separate it with the reality constructed of the privileging of the now. But the presencing becomes less accessible, and you will not have the knowledge, because everything you learned, everything you lived, has the possibility of being accessible for you. And it's not very hard to understand that the more you have, the better it is. You make it more easy to plan your life, to understand reality. It is the very process of blocking it out that makes it hard to remember. I think the idea from this came when I spoke to a chap called Pedro, and he said until he was 60, 65 somewhere, he never ever forgot anything. Nothing was forgotten. All phone numbers, everything he should do, or what had happened to him, it was easily accessible. And for every time he was just alive in the present, memory could come in, and memory could be both now, tomorrow, or yesterday. It didn't really matter to him. But he moved to Western culture, and somewhere in the process, memory was all of a sudden something hard to grasp, to reach. Just gonna make him move here. Continue in the lovely sun, sorry for the interruption. Well, until just a couple of days, I saw memory that way also. I know about the, what can you say, the criticism from neurology and science of cognition, and also the marvelous book by Carl Pribram about the holographic brain. But this is more convincing for me because it goes to the very core of my own and your experience. It's not relayed, it is directly. It's directly understandable that everything that has happened to you can be remembered, can be taken up, and it should be that way because you get access to so much more of reality, and that will inform your decisions in the future and will also make moving about being in the present more enjoyable. One could also compare that to a sort of closing of the mind. I mentioned the other day closing of the Arabic mind in the early Middle Ages in Spain, when Spain was the capital of the Caliphate, and they ended up in some limitation. They had imported Aristotle, Plato to some extent, and many other thinkers, and thinking became freer and freer, and in the end someone thought it went too far, and it was sort of decided, or made rather, to shut the thinking off. And I think it is these tendencies that is what making everything more and more narrow, and in the end you have a sort of choicelessness. You cannot go any longer because the limitations were set before you even started to think. And starting to think more and more will lead you into the limitations more and more. We can open up that memory. We can make it accessible once more, and you will get a fuller, wholesome, holographic reality. Because in some instance, making that difference between future and past doesn't make any sense at all. Because just planning, all the planning should in that case, deconstruct this also, be coming from the past. And it's the planning that makes the future happen. So this is a rather strong revealment of a tendency that is very hard to point it in normal terms. And it is almost like you have a fishing pond and all the memories are swimming around in that fishing pond, and you are the fisher, and you had to throw in the string and hope that you can catch one of those memories, because they are made absent of tendencies that were already present even when you started to think. And that is a rather fundamental choicelessness. And of course, this is also the reason behind the thinking that all traditions, all thinking should all go out of the window. It's becoming harder and harder to see that these things actually has in storage great knowledge. Think about the liturgy that was taken away during the 60s in the Second Vatican Concilium. One couldn't see that those liturgy contain knowledge and that it actually transmitted something from person to person. That had become hidden, not accessible anymore to the presencing. I don't think they did those dramatic things to be mean or a complete lack of civilization or education. Far from it. The people in the Second Vatican Concilium were very well informed people. But it was the things that were established before concepts, before they even went to Rome to start these talks, that came into action. And they were they that caused the impossibility of thinking that these things contain tremendous amount of knowledge. Some coffee more. I have to mention this is also the first day of the Oriental Lent today. The very first day, and it's a celebration in many countries. Very important. Church bells have already been cast, and I saw a procession earlier on. And I like this metaphor. You can also say that you are, every time you have poor Jack sitting in the middle, Jack in the middle, he's in here. I'm not talking about here today, we're talking mostly about now. But every time you try to access that material, you immediately constrain the whole thing. You make it limited. And that's the jaggedness of this timeline. Start and start and start and. So in the very moment, this is already always going on. And coming behind it is a tough thing. It might look that at the beginning, but I really think it's not that tough at all. It's the ideas of things being so distant that needs to be challenged, because once they are challenged, you will see it's incredibly easy to access everything in the past. It's not a struggle. And that was the same with this Pedro I talked to many years ago. It was never a problem for him. He was constantly accessible. And having that resource, it's a wealth of information, experience, thinking, realizations, downfall, and all these things help you to not repeat wrongdoings, mistakes, and it also informs your decisions. So your decisions become stronger. And this is one of the best explanations for what prana/ki chi is. It's the degree of wholeness. The more you access, the more direction you get. So it's a wholeness process, making something whole again. But the process doesn't involve taking away the division. It is the realization that the division was never there. That is actually quite easy. And it means we do not need to struggle that much. And once we learn that, we will no longer either flush memories down the toilet as we do every day. That's gone. Let's start all over. Well, isn't that what modern society been starting to do? Constantly starting over and over again. Why is that? Well, it seems that our decisions are no longer widely informed from knowledge, because limitations are playing there game without us even knowing it. And I would say this is even going so far that the reason we are so unfocused today, memory plays a significant role there. For to be focused and be a permanent, persistent self in life, the divisions make that permanence hard to gain. You are, so to speak, your past experience. But if you instead see that you are this reflective consciousness that owns the experiences and keep them in this storage bank, you will have both a very unconscious, absent-minded Jack. It's Jack once more, and poor old Jack has to sit by the fishing pond and hope that a memory will come up, or any other thing. And isn't that a nice model of what HDHD is? It's this lack of access to one's own past, present, and now. This is an easy process to heal the division and make you whole. It's making me wholesome just talking about it. Makes you anticipating greater fortunes and a greater future. And this is the best thing with deconstruction when it works. It is really fun. It is extraordinary fun. Apart from what it does, it is fun in itself. It's an act that beats, I think, almost even having a really nice steak. Well, we continue with this later. I wish you all a very pleasant afternoon, and thank you. Bye-bye.